Hello, and welcome to part 2 of a 2-part webinar series on leadership, how to lead to better outcomes. These webinars are a prereq to the Healthcare Leadership Seminar that will take place on December 6, 2018 at the Queensberry Hotel. I'm pleased to once again introduce our speaker, Greg Owens.
So we're asking ourselves, what is high performance? And the definition of high performance is that it's the leadership work that's done to achieve targeted outcomes to improve the quality of life for our customers. And I'd ask you not to get hung up in the word customers. It's really people who are there to receive our services, people that we have to bring services to. If it's emergency medical services, the people that you go out to assist in emergency situations, that's who we say we come into work for every day. We strive for high performance for higher moral purpose, the well-being of children and families and youth and communities. That we want to create organizations that tap into the energy of their employees and therefore lower turnover and have creative organizations that get to best outcomes. And there's high stakes for low performance. If you are low performing in your job, if your organization has too many people who are low performing or is generally a low performing organization, there's risk, particularly for the work that you do, emergency medical services. I have to believe that you have to be high performing more than most folks would have to be. But what are the risks when you allow a portion of the organization or individuals or units to be low performing? What's the risk for your organization? So if you were to go to and there used to be bookstores, but now everything's online. But if you were to find information about leadership and low and high performance, this is, in essence, a condensed version of all the theory that you would find. Perhaps not all, but a lot of the theory you would find. And this comes from some work that was compiled, and I was trained by the American Public Human Services Association around low and high performance. And this is a diagnostic tool. And this tool really is useful because most diagnoses has to begin with where I am with my leadership work. How am I engaging in high performance work? Am I high performance in my work during the course of a week, or was I low performing more than I should have been this week? And how do I get to and stay in high performance? And so the good and bad news about this particular slide is that once you know, you can't unknow, and now you know. So the question then becomes, what do I plan to do about this? And so if we were going to take some, these are called the markers of performance. Low performance organizations versus high performance organizations, management style and philosophy, authority and responsibility. And so in the red, you find what we call low performance, right? Lower performing organizations that are driven by the problem. They can't exist unless they have a problem that drives their work. They're bound by the rules and they're focused on the system. The control of the organization in terms of information, resources, and making decisions is centralized. There's only a few people who can do that, and everybody else has to wait until they move or make a decision or communicate before they can move forward. In this organization, communication is generally top down, if at all, because knowledge is power, and people don't often give that up because people want to maintain their power. There's not a lot of opportunities for participation or interaction with management. There's not a lot of meetings. There's not a lot of communication. There's not a lot of correspondence in low-performing organizations. And there's this win-lose and adversarial mindset. And oftentimes, people don't even know why they're doing the work. The ends and the means are confused. In terms of authority and responsibility, the premise is that the top of the organization knows best, and therefore, let's wait for them to manifest their genius. In point of fact, the people at the top of the organization probably know less about the work that we're doing throughout the organization than we do. And if they were really, really good, great, high-performing leaders, they would free us up to do what we do best. There's not a lot of risk-taking. Then there's these parent-child interactions. So if I try to do something and it doesn't work out, there's finger shaking. And you know what that parent-child interaction looks like. Somebody towering over you, telling you all the things you should have done differently and correctly. Fear and punishment are the motivators in this organization. And if you disagree, even if you've got a better perspective or a different idea, that's disagreement seen as being disloyal. The organization is not renewed there's competition in problem solving, and there's short-term perspective in this organization, and quality is not the top consideration. It's who can I get to take a look at me and all the wonderful work that I'm doing, because that will move me up in the organization. And that may help individuals, but it will not help an organization become high performing. On the other side, in the purple, a high performance organization is driven by its visions of what the work should look like and the values of the organization. They're well articulated and everybody knows about them. The focus is on the customer, and this requires us to be very discerning about the difference between the people that we say we're there for, those who are the recipients of services, or the customer, and the people we work with who are stakeholders or collaborators, but they're not the ultimate recipient of our services. And then the third body that we need to be concerned about are the food chain people, the folks who can either help our organizations grow or make them disappear overnight with the stroke of a pen. They are very critically important. We got to make sure they have what they need, but they are not the customer, and that's not the reason we come into work every day. A high-performance organization looks at results. The communication is dispersed throughout the organization. Information is not held and hoarded, but it's used to solve problems and for self-guidance in the organization. And now you have a win-win mindset, both within the organization and for those people you work with and for those people who are your stakeholders who collaborate with you. In terms of authority and responsibility, you can see here each individual takes responsibility for their own actions. They have a personal sense of efficacy about their work. The interactions are adult-adult. The self-expression and making contributions are primary motivators. There's renewal in the organization. People work together to solve problems. The perspective for the work is bigger and longer term. Improvement is always ongoing because we're not competing. We're looking to work together about what could happen for the organization in the future, as well as getting through the crisis of the moment. And each individual takes responsibility for the success of the entire organization. And so when you think about an organization that's operating in the purple, think about the story of NASA. And people who went to NASA when in the 60s, Kennedy was trying to get someone on the moon. And the story is that they went and spoke to someone who was cleaning the floors and asked, "What are you doing?" And rather than say, "Well, I'm sweeping or mopping the floors," this individual said, "I'm helping to put somebody on the moon." So when your organization has someone who's at that level, could be considered lower level in the organization, although certainly very valuable, and they understand the values and where the organization is going, the direction, etc., that's an organization that's probably more inclined to be high performing. So the diagnosis is, where is your organization? And the actual activity would be to take a look at something that's in the red in your organization, be able to clearly define what made it or makes it operate in the red. Think about how you can identify things that are in the purple or in high performance in your organization, and then find something that's in the red or low performing and begin to strategize about how to move it into the purple or high performing realm and how to keep it there for longer periods of time. That's the benefit of knowing what low and high performance actually looks like. And that's what the exercise would be. So I ask you to just think about that. It's another diagnostic tool for you. And hopefully you walk away with some things that you can actually utilize before we're done this morning. There are three things that leaders want to do and leadership requires: setting direction or letting the organization know where we're going, establishing boundaries for how we treat one another, and probably more importantly, how we treat people who we are there for, and creating alignment. And so alignment is making sure that the organization doesn't operate in silos, that everybody knows where they're going, why the organization is heading in that direction, and can contribute to the direction of the organization. If you think about when your back is misaligned and what that feels like, or when your car is out of alignment and what that feels like, that's really what we're talking about here. Because when your car is out of alignment, you've got to take it in, and maybe you're doing work that's warranty work over and over again because your car is never in alignment. Think about that in terms of the organization. If the organization is always misaligned and cannot get to high performance, you're constantly doing work to fix things. That's called warranty work. And so how do we get the boundaries set in the organization? We clearly articulate the values, and we make sure that the values drive the work. How do we set direction? We get ideas from throughout the organization about how we should move forward and what about where we're going. And so we can establish goals, we can establish the things that help us to manifest the ideas of the organization so we can know where we're going. My grandmother used to say, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. Great organizations know where they're going and everybody's on board. And then how do you create alignment? Well, you get energy from the organization, you put energy into the organization, and you have what are called strong edge decisions. Jack Welch, formerly with GE, used to talk about edge decisions or the line in the sand. What will you not tolerate about the work that's going on in your organization? And so that's how you begin to set direction, set boundaries, and create alignment using values, ideas, energy, and edge. And if you do all that the right way, you get to and stay in high performance for longer periods of time. So what do you know about your organization? What's the vision of your work? What are the core values? And how do you know this? Is it talked about? Is it displayed on the walls? Or was it just in your orientation package and never talked about again? The organization's responsible for getting ideas from throughout the workforce and even from the people who we say we're coming into work for or the customers. Big ideas rest upon the values and the energy and the edge of the organization. So big ideas are encompassing and metaphorical. They set the direction for the organization. They keep people focused on the same goals, and everyone in the organization can contribute to the ideas. But they're huge. They can be overwhelming sometimes. So here's a big idea for you to think about. One of the states in the middle of the country said, we're not going to have a nursing home that I wouldn't put my mother into. Now, given that we love our mothers, what does that do about the whole operation of nursing homes from the perspective of state oversight and federal oversight and funding and accountability? What you end up doing is saying to a nursing home, you know what, this isn't clean enough. Your staff is not attentive enough. Your bathrooms are not accessible enough. And well, how can you? Well, because I know that my mother couldn't operate in this place and I would be comfortable. So here's some things you got to do to improve. Here's some time frames to do it. And if you don't improve within the time frames so that I'm comfortable bringing my mother here, we're going to do something different about your funding and find someone who will. Every child has a right to a childhood, which means that you got to make sure that every child has everything they need to be a great child and to be successful and to be healthy. What does that have implications for? Diet, access to early child care, parents who can be involved and with them on a regular basis, that they're able to have housing and don't have to worry about where they're going to live and sleep at night. And every child will enter school ready to learn. These are big ideas from places around the country who are leadership driven in the work that they do. And they focus on making sure that the barriers to getting to these ideas and these outcomes are taken care of. So the question then becomes, what are your big ideas about the emergency medical services work that you do? Is it every community will need less EMS services? Every community will be safe. No one will suffer and require our services within the next 50 years. Those are big ideas that are important to consider in the organization. But here's some things that you want to think about as you consider your big ideas. They've got to be clear. There's no point in having a big idea that someone does not understand because then they can't follow. They need to be concise because nobody has all day to listen. They need to be consistent with the values and the vision of the organization. It's wonderful to have a big idea that's consistent with what you're doing at the workplace. But if your big idea cannot be manifested in the workplace, then you need to either take it to where it can be manifested or make sure that you develop a different one for the organization. It's got to be consistent with the vision, values, and the organizational structure, and it's got to be compelling. In other words, people have to be drawn to your big idea. And these are the 4 areas that you want to focus on with regard to big ideas from the organization. So as you ask people and ask yourself, what are my big ideas about the work that I'm doing? Make sure that they're clear, concise, consistent, and compelling. That might be the barrier to implementing your big ideas. The paradox of ideas is that there are big ideas that can actually transform the organization. They are quantum in nature. but that there are also ideas that are about the individual acts that people have to take on a daily basis to get the work done. This could be considered more of the technical work. They're incremental, evolutionary change ideas. They're about continuous improvement. They are equally important. And so the paradox here is to get both big and little quantum and incremental ideas from throughout the organization to make sure that the organization is always moving towards high performance. It's important to generate energy. It's not abstract. It's real. You know when you're energized. You know when you have it and when you don't have it. You know when you love coming into work and that day that you don't. And the question that you want to ask yourself, which I posed earlier, is do people get more energy from me when I walk into a room, or are they more energized when I leave the meeting and walk out of the room? That's an energy premise. It's the reason we come to work. It's the reason why we continue to go to work. And I want to stick a pin in a couple of bullets here. What de-energizes you and others around you, and what will you do to stop the energy leaks? The energy leaks in the organization are significant. It's important that you find out where they are. Is it language? Is it commitment? Is it timeliness? These are things that suck energy from the organization. And then the question is, from the leadership perspective, not your position, but the conversations you have in meetings and the conversations that you have interpersonally, what are you going to do to stop the energy leaks in the organization? Edge has to do with the things you will or won't tolerate about the work in the organization, the line in the sand, and what action you'll take to stop something from happening again and again. And the most important thing about edge is that people are watching to see what your edge decisions are and what you're going to respond to and what you're going to let go. And if they find inconsistencies, if they find preferential treatment, if they find things that make your edge almost indefinable, then you've got an organization that's going to have energy sapped from it. You're not going to generate and create ideas because there's no trust in the organization, and you're not going to get to and stay in high performance. So if we were going to do an exercise around this, here's what the exercise might look like. In the future, you see somebody who you helped. What do you want them to say about the experience? And their responses will kind of articulate the importance of their experience with you, and that's the values premise. If that's the important things about their experience with you, then you automatically know the things that you won't tolerate. So if they say they made me feel good, or they saved my life in a more profound fashion, the things that are your edge decisions are the things that you would do which would not make them feel good, or that you are unable to do to save their lives. So if you have strong values, you automatically or almost inherently know what your edge decisions are. If you have strong values, the organization knows what you're not going to tolerate. They have to see it behaviorally. And then how do you generate energy? How do you create and maintain an environment where people want to contribute, want to perform at their best, etc.? So again, a review of the basic tenets of this leadership work that we've been talking about thus far. Winning organizations and movements that are leadership and high performance organizations have strong values. Everyone knows what they are. They know what they look like. Decisions are made that are consistent with them. The organization finds ways to make sure its organizational members, staff, etc., are energized, and decisions are made, and people can see where the tough calls are being made about the things that are not going to be tolerated in the organization. I'm going to spend a little time talking about your leadership lens and how you can actually develop it, just by looking for opportunities to do and places to do more leadership in high performance work. So this is a chart developed by the American Public Human Services Association based upon the work of a theorist called Rensis Likert. And you've heard about the Likert chart. It basically has a lot of entities, people, circumstances in the middle where it bulges up or bulges down. And then at the end are the extremes. So you might have an organization that has 5 or 10% of the people who are doing great high performance work, 5 or 10% of the people who will never do high performance work, and the rest of the organization, 60% or so, is in the middle waiting to see what kind of work they're going to be asked to do. And that's really what this chart is. So what Likert did was to take a set of activities: communication, setting goals, teamwork, motivation of the employees and their attitudes, and then what was the output like? System 1 is an outdated system. It was the charismatic leader kind of position, kind of top down, sometimes down only, as you can see from the various indicators. The motivation was about money, getting paid, and making sure that I had a job. Attitudes were hostile towards the boss, towards each other, towards people in general. And at best, output was mediocre. In System 2, which was the advent of unions mostly, you've got this benevolent autocratic kind of operation where the communication is mostly down. The goals are still set at the top. There's some teamwork. The motivation is based upon status. So do I have access? Can people see me as important? The attitudes are mixed, but still mostly towards the negative, and the output is only fair to good. System 3 and System 4, where you find high performance, consultative and participative. And you can see by the communication, goals set, teamwork, employee motivation, and attitudes that everything is moving towards being better, being positive, and what we could say more high performing and more leadership driven. System 0, Marvin Weisborg, I think, was the theorist who came along in the 1970s and said, I'm seeing organizations that don't operate like any of these others. What are they doing? What are they about? And called them laissez-faire. Be careful of these because they look like and feel like they are high performance, but they are not. As you take a look at the output, it's mixed, poor to good at best. And that's your technical areas within the organization. So if you take a look at the specialized areas in your organization, the people who are doing specialized tasks, in essence and in summary, what this requires of us is that we pay more attention to them to make sure that they're functioning in a high performance fashion. So in the world of juvenile justice, if you have a specialized unit within a facility, let's say it's a substance abuse unit, they may in fact be excellent at the work they do, but are not connected to the rest of the facility and the work that they're trying to do. And so that's perhaps why there's a disconnect and young people are not moving through it as expeditiously as they might. These are your think tanks where great work is being done, but the staff really don't care about each other. They don't care about the rest of the organization. They don't really set goals that are part of the organization. There's not a whole lot of teamwork. There is motivation, but it's from outside the organization. And so that's why sometimes the output is mixed, poor to good. So the way to kind of do your diagnosis with this is to ask yourself, first and foremost, where do I function most of the time? And just if you float between System 1 and 2, be honest with that. Some folks have said, well, I'm kind of 1.5. Wherever you land with that, where do you function in terms of your diagnosis of your work within the organization? And where does your team function? Are they mostly in System 2 or are they mostly in System 4? And get input from your team because not everybody will see things the same way. And quite honestly, and you know this, as human beings, we're not always at our optimal best every day. And so organizations will function in that fashion also. So you'll find, based upon circumstances, organizations could be floating in System 1 and 2 and need to get into System 3 and 4. There are organizations where, depending upon what is happening with a budget circumstance, they now have to go back to System 1, telling people what they have to do and focusing on a top-down style of management. Whereas when there wasn't a budget crunch, they were able to do a lot of teamwork and there was a lot of consultation. So we will not always be in high performance. The question is, do we know when we're functioning either in the red from the earlier markers of performance chart or in System 1 and 2? And when will we get into the purple or high performance, or when will we get into System 3 and 4? And can we stay there for longer periods of time? So that's the diagnostic around this work, and that's why this chart, I think, is critically important. And that's the exercise that we would do if we were together and have a chance to talk to one another about this work. So again, quickly from the Leadership Engine by Noel Tichy. Winning leaders and organizations clearly articulate a set of values for the entire organization. They embody the values with their behavior. I can see what your value of trust looks like by the way we treat one another, and it encourages others to apply the values in their own decisions and their own actions. So Tichy talks about the leadership engine in the basic premise that if you get your engine functioning to optimal capacity, you will have better performance, just like cars and trains and planes with the best engines get the best performance. So how do you walk the talk of leadership? Well, you walk the talk of leadership when your values emulate your behavior. And so if your values in the world of working with children and families are that children and families are important, that you're going to have trust and openness and include them, and your actions are that children and families are going to be safe, have enough food, thrive, and be successful, and they are part of the process, then you're walking the talk. But you can also stumble the mumble. If your values are that children and families are important, now look, they're the same values, that trust and openness and inclusiveness is a value in your organization. And that the actions you take now are that people don't have enough. There's a lot of poverty. There's a lot of crime. That we make all the decisions for them, they're not included, etc. Then you're stumbling the mumble of your values. The organization will see that. Your children, youth, and families will see that. And you will not be able to get to and stay in high performance as you wish. You have to walk the talk of the values and not stumble the mumble. High performance requires not settling for results or honoring values, but it requires both. So there are organizations where people get results and honor their values, and they are probably the best possible organizations. But right below that are organizations that have great high values, but they're not doing any work. They're not getting results, but they really do talk about to honor the values. There are, in the upper right quadrant, organizations that get results, but they mistreat one another and they mistreat the customer. There are no values. Machiavellian organization. And then the last one, in the green, everybody's feeling wonderful. They're having parties every Friday. People bringing cake and cookies. No results, no values. They just kind of come into work. So what kind of organization are you working in? And how do you make sure that you get to that quadrant where you're getting results and honoring the values? Because in our organizations, the nature of people will take over. 5% on the left are going to do high-performing work no matter what you do. 5% roughly are going to do low-performing work no matter what you do. There's another percentage that's going to do high-performance work if you give them a chance and give them support, but 60% or so are looking and trying to figure out what's in it for me. What's in it for me? Why should I be high-performing? Where are your edge decisions? How do your behaviors reflect your values? Here's some tools. The interesting thing about these tools is that we've always known them. We've always had them. We may not have used them to do intentional high-performance work. So your time is a leadership tool. Your behavior, where you give your attention, and decisions and assignments. These are all leadership tools. And quite honestly, the people in our organizations that take most of our time and attention tend to be people who are low performers. And the reason for that is because they require a lot of supervision and a lot of action, personnel action. They just take our time. And those of us who are high performers don't get time and attention and opportunity sometimes. So if we're not careful, the energy leaves our work. We become de-energized because we begin to ask the question, what's in it for me to be high performing if this person who's low performing is not being held to task, and by the way, is getting the time and attention from the organization. So we got to be careful of that. So where do you spend your leadership time? Sometimes it's about focus of attention. And no matter where you are in the organization, the premise is you've got to do some leadership work. So if you're at the top of the organization, there's still some leadership work that you've got to do, even while you try and minimize the task and management work. And I had a boss once who told us that she was never going to change the ink in the copy machines. And everybody thought that was kind of, arrogant. But what she might have been saying is that given my position, that she was on the executive staff, if I spend my time dealing with the ink in the copy machine, I can't spend my time driving the vision and values of the organization. So if you're in the top of the organization, you're required to do a lot of leadership work. But if you're in the bottom of the organization or a line worker or clerical support, or you still are required to do some leadership work, which means you got to know the values and visions so that when people come in, they see high performance immediately. So how is your behavior a tool? Well, you're always a role model. Irrespective of what Charles Barkley said years ago, we're all role models, and that people are always watching to see whether or not we are following our behavior reflects our values, and whether or not we're high performing. So be the leader you want to be led by. And in this work, sometimes we ask about the person who you followed and why you followed them. And if you can talk about those characteristics, the next question is, how many of those characteristics do I have? And what am I lacking in? Because something made you follow somebody, and if you don't have those characteristics, then perhaps you're not as high performing as you think. Stop saying we and they, use us and them. Stop complaining about other divisions and other parts of your organization, and model respect. Being on time is one way to do this. Staff meetings are not focused on outcomes. Make sure they're focused on outcomes and the people that you say you're coming to work for. Your time and attention is critical. You send a signal to people around you about where you spend your time, about what's important. You have to spend your time where performance is not happening, as well as supporting where performance is happening. Which meetings do you go to, and are they focused on outcomes, and what do you do in your meeting time? So I once supervised a unit of social workers from around the state, and I discovered that they were doing reports that basically were indicating that they were at work. They were talking about all the meetings they went to and that sort of thing. And they were supposed to be preparing families for children who were being released from our juvenile justice facilities. And so when I said to them, I don't need to hear about all the meetings you attended. As a matter of fact, what I need you to do is to figure out which meetings you can stop attending, because they're just meetings to prove that you were there, and start attending meetings that have something to do with preparing a family for when their child comes home. And it took quite a bit of time for them to adjust, because we tend to get used to doing monthly reports that simply indicate that we were there, instead of generating information to indicate that we're getting performance and we're getting to outcomes. And so I'll ask you to think about that. What kind of meetings do you attend? What kind of meetings do you convene? Who's there? Are you just having them because you've always had them, or are you actually having meetings that have meaning and are about outcomes? Who do you take to the meetings, etc.? The assignments that we give are important. We got to give people assignments to get them thinking about performance and outcomes. We can volunteer for assignments because they will simply build new skills. But we got to ask for expectation, directions, and required outcomes. There's nothing worse than getting an assignment and saying, I need this by 5 o'clock on Friday, and you really didn't know what the expectation was, and so you got the assignment done, but you had to do it over and over again because either the person who gave it to you wasn't clear, or you weren't clear, and you didn't have the kind of organization where asking questions was seen as being a strength. So you've gotten assignments, I presume, that you really didn't completely understand. I hope you take the opportunity in the future, if you don't understand an assignment that you get or what's expected of you, that you ask specific questions so you can get to the outcomes that people are looking for. The last bullet here is really critically important. You got to publicly reward contributions. You got to say thank you in public. And there's one phrase, it's about 6 words, that's so critically important for our organizations if we want them to be high performing. And generally we pause here and ask people for what they think that short phrase is. But I'll just tell you, it's I think I made a mistake. If you don't hear those words in an organization that is struggling to do right, but we all know that organizations are comprised of human beings who will make mistakes. If a mistake is made and people don't apologize and say, I think I made a mistake, be careful, because you're in an organization that's either covering up, disingenuous, or believes that there's something weak about admitting that you've made a mistake and trying to get better. Let me stick a pin in this last one here. How do you reward high performance in your organization? How did you get rewarded when you were high performing? Chances are you got more work. You got more assignments, because after all, you're the go-to person. I want you to think about whether that's really a reward and how we reward high performers in our organization. Decisions are important to consider. So how do we make them? Which staff makes them? Are they a part of the performance perspectives? We need to help staff make better decisions, so we need to spend time coaching and teaching. These are things that help us with our decisions. And so the leadership competencies that I want to spend just a minute talking about are the discrete skills and abilities that enable us to use the tools effectively. Those of you who use tools a lot know that it's great to have the tool, but if you don't know what you're doing, eventually something bad is going to happen. It's great to have a hammer, but if you don't know what you're doing, eventually your thumb's going to pay the cost for it. So these are the competencies that allow us to use the tools effectively. And I'm going to put them up here very quickly. Ask you to think about them. Ask you how many of them you have, how many of them your organization has, and how many of them do you think you can begin to develop so your team, your organization, and you can become higher performing and better in the leadership work. Now, again, this is not about position. This is about your willingness to gain the competencies to use the tools more effectively. And so you can, in fact, have CEOs who only have a few of these and people who are at lower levels in the organization who have more of these. Sometimes CEOs and executive directors get their positions not because they were great at the work, but for some other reasons. So the question is, who will do leadership work, not who will operate from the main office and get the best parking space. So I'm not telling you not to ascribe to get the best parking space. What I'm saying is, if you have these competencies and use them for the skills, if you're setting direction, boundaries, and aligning the organization for success and high performance, you can, in fact, do more leadership work. There's a plow plowing outside, so I apologize if you're hearing that now. You have to champion innovation, and you have to be a cheerleader for it. And so Gordon McKenzie, who talks about orbiting the giant hairball, like Corporate Fool's Guide to Surviving with Grace, says this: most companies are peppered with people who are very quick to say no. Most newly hatched ideas are shot down before they even have time to grow feathers, let alone wings. In saying yes to all those who brought their ideas to me, I was simply leveling the imbalance a bit. One yes in a sea of no's can make the difference. And so it's easy to say no because it's less risky. But if you say yes, there's a risk involved, but you can also get great ideas generated and creativity and trust within the organization. And Gordon McKenzie is saying one yes in a sea of no's can really lift up leadership and high performance. So here's some other things I'd ask you to think about that leaders have to do. You have to inspire audacity. Provide proof. Your data's got to be good. Your statistics have to be good. It's not the end all, but it certainly does help to make the case if you've got good data. You got to have skin in the game. You got to put yourself and your reputation at risk to do high performance work. You have to cultivate love, not just for the organization, but for the people who are coming in the door for help, assistance, and support. Leaders cultivate love. They cultivate compassion. And there has to be some degree of fear. One of the authors has said that the fear really should be not fearful of doing the work every day. That's excitement. But fear that you won't get to the outcomes you need to get to, and that a child or a family or a community might not get the best because you didn't do your best leadership work. Communication is critical. Great organizations have great communication systems. Everybody knows what they need to know, when they need to know it, in order to do the work that needs to be done in a timely fashion. So what's the communication strategy for where you work? What would the perfect communication strategy look like? And what's the difference is simply a gap exercise. What is it like right now? What should it look like to be its optimal best? And what's the difference? And then what will you do to close that gap? It's an exercise you can do at the job, starting with yourself and then working with your team and then finding out a way to get input from throughout the organization. And you will really be high performing when you find a way to get input from the people that you say you're there for, the customers, the children, youth, families, the communities. What am I going to do to begin to close the gap? What does my team need to do? What resources do we need? Whose help do we need? And make sure that when you seek help, you know what you want them to do when they get there. There's nothing worse than calling for help. Someone shows up and you don't know exactly what you want them to do. They're not there to figure it out. They're there to provide help. So do some work up front so that when they get there, you know what you want them to do. And make sure that the work aligns with other projects and initiatives that are already underway so you're not replicating and duplicating things that may be happening in other parts of the organization. So we're going to close now and talk about what you're going to do the next time you are at work, maybe tomorrow, maybe Monday, to become a better leader. You've had some exposure to some information. Is there something that struck your fancy, something that was interesting or curious for you to pursue? And if it is, what are you going to do? How are you going to get better at it? How do you find out where you're in the red, move to the purple, whether you're in Covey's quadrant 1, and how do you get back to and stay in quadrant 2? How do you find out if you're in systems 1 and 2 on the Likert chart and spend more time in systems 3 and 4 where there's high performance? How do you encourage leadership work from throughout the organization? Leaders are on the hook for teaching. They're on the hook for learning. They're on the hook for making sure that they have strong values and everybody can see them throughout the organization, and that they manifest energy and stop the energy leaks in the organization. That everyone knows the direction the organization is going, and that there is alignment from throughout the organization, and people are not stuck in silos doing work that's not connected to the outcomes for the organization. And so that's the story of leadership for today. I hope this was helpful and that you were able to get something out of it. And if I can be helpful in the future, I certainly will be. Thanks so much.